A catastrophic situation is playing out in Australia.
The smoke visible from space.
A New Year's Eve crisis going into 2020.
People are telling us this is the worst they've ever seen. The fires have burned more intensely, more ferociously. They seem to have a mind of their own.
Satellite imagery is showing that Arctic sea ice is at its lowest levels on record.
In northern Siberia, it hit 100.4 degrees.
We are looking right now at the all-time record heat for the month of June.
A catastrophic Category 4 hurricane bearing down in the U.S.
We could be looking at a majority of the surrounding communities flooded with upwards of 9 to 20 feet of water.
The two largest wildfires in Colorado history are burning dangerously close, just miles apart.
On the heels of what has been a historic and deadly wildfire season, the winds fanning these flames are expected to last another 24 hours.
Friends' homes are on fire and you're watching it with your eyes.
And it is officially the busiest hurricane season ever on record.
And the few people we met who chose to stay behind here, they stayed behind because they're simply overwhelmed. They're tired of running.
Just no rest in this record year for the hurricane-battered Gulf Coast.
Stronger storms, more storms, heavier rain. Our climate is changing.
Climate change is one of, if not the biggest existential crisis faced by humanity today. With carbon emissions at an all-time high, fluctuations in weather patterns, increases in intensity of natural disasters, and yet a severe lack of large-scale action remaining, things seem rather dire. However, the issue isn't necessarily that we don't have enough resources, but rather we haven't allocated them in the right direction. The United States is falling behind the rest of the world in regard to their public transportation sector, which has been proven to allow for cheaper shipping, easier access to transportation, job growth, accessibility, and of course, reducing carbon emissions. In 2017, the transportation sector beat out the energy sector and the industrial sector in the United States carbon emissions. We clearly have a big problem on our hand. One of the most prominent solutions to this issue is the implementation of widespread public transportation, the most innovative of which being the advent of high-speed rail. High-speed rail is defined by the European Union as railways reaching at least 200 kilometers per hour, or around 120 miles per hour. While Europe and Asia seem to be pioneering the adoption of high-speed rail, the United States has been lagging behind, lacking a single fully functioning high-speed railway. In the early 20th century, the United States was an empire built on railroad infrastructure. Shipping and cross-country transportation largely took place over railways, as they had been the most efficient and affordable form of long-distance transportation. However, after World War II, the United States invested significantly in automobile infrastructure, later developing the interstate highway system under President Eisenhower. Along with this, through the Marshall Plan, which focused on helping rebuild Europe in the aftermath of the Second World War, the United States assisted in building automobile infrastructure in Europe, shifting the Western world away from public transportation and rail. Since then, Europe has invested significantly in their development of high-speed rail, the first lines of which were built in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. These were shown to significantly improve travel times internationally in Europe. In 2008, the Trans-European High-Speed Rail Network began development, being a stated goal of the European Union. The lines now extend higher than 3,000 kilometers, with a goal of expanding up to 7,000 kilometers in total. While Europe has seen success in its high-speed rail development, no one has been as daring as China, who now has around 2/3 of the world's high-speed railways. Over the course of under 12 years, China was able to develop 36,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, covering over 80% of major cities and branching out across the country. This high-speed rail network saw immediate success, providing the infrastructure for around 75 million people to commute to and from Shanghai, who would have otherwise been unable to due to lack of affordability in inner-city housing and accessible transportation. This has also resulted in the reduction of automobiles on the road, significantly reducing carbon emissions from day-to-day commuting, especially in a country with a population as large as China's. This was incredibly effective due to the location of the railways, which cut through cities and branched out into smaller cities and towns, maximizing the amount of possible commuters. This also resulted in the reduction of airline usage, varying around a half or a third of initial consumption. However, the development of such transformative infrastructure does come at a cost, and quite a significant one. In total, to develop the 36,000 kilometers of rail, China had to spend around $700 billion, with an average construction cost of around $18.6 million per kilometer. It may be surprising to hear, but this was relatively cheap for this type of infrastructure. China was incredibly strategic in their development processes, from streamlining their independent supply chains under 4 branches: construction, equipment manufacturing, technology research, and operation management, to utilizing research from enterprises, scientific research institutions, and universities, to standardizing their management and streamlining their construction process in an efficient industrial fashion. They prioritized minimizing resource waste and standardizing design to keep production as consistent as possible. Still, only 5 out of 16 running lines are able to cover their costs, with the project still leaving China in significant debt. They made up for some costs by selling their technology and knowledge from this development. However, most of the project is still not very profitable. But the goal of the high-speed rail project wasn't to prioritize profit, but rather accessibility, job opportunities, and total economic advantage, overall resulting in a net good for the Chinese economy and the people. So if Europe and China were so successful in their development of high-speed rail, why is the United States lagging so far behind? Well, it all comes down to 2 primary reasons: money and politics. California's high-speed rail project, better known as the California Bullet Train, is a proposed 800-mile, or around 1,287 kilometers, high-speed railway from San Francisco to Los Angeles to Anaheim, cutting through the San Joaquin Valley, with proposed links between Merced and Sacramento and Los Angeles and San Diego. Initially voted on by voters in 2008, the project was set to cost around $33 billion in total, with an initial investment of $10 billion. Since then, the project has racked up a budget of around $105 billion, with only 119 miles of railway completed between Merced and Bakersfield. One might wonder how over the course of 14 years so little was done, and well, it all comes down to a variety of setbacks. The development and construction of the California Bullet Train has been a logistical nightmare, from land acquisition costs to working with communities to prevent unwanted interference, to growing public disapproval for the development of the project due to its lack of progress, and overall just the lack of sufficient funding to keep the project going. On top of this, in 2019, the Trump administration pulled $929 million from funding for the Bullet Train project due to lack of sufficient progress. In October of 2021, Newsom attempted to get a bill passed allocating around $4.2 billion to the project to keep the development going, but his legislative body refused to send him the bill, rather advocating for funding to be sent towards improving current local rails such as Bay Area Rapid Transit, which currently lacks sufficient maintenance funding. Advocates of the California high-speed rail development are cautiously optimistic under the current administration, with the $1 trillion infrastructure bill allocating around $20 billion for intercity rail. We'll just have to wait and see if their optimism will be met with results. There are a variety of reasons why China's high-speed rail effort was far more successful than California's bullet train. First off, the costs of development were far greater for California. Land acquisition costs were significantly higher. Due to labor laws and California's higher cost of living, the labor costs were significantly higher. China's industrial availability allowed for their material costs to be significantly cheaper, with China mass-producing the infrastructure for their large-scale project. Overall, China averaged around $30 million per mile of rail, while California was averaging costs of around $148 million per mile of rail. That's around 5 times as much. The rail project in California also faced significantly more political criticisms for land disruption, from construction harming the environment and landowners. Overall, the project has become growingly unpopular and shows little sign of being successfully completed anytime soon. To sum up, high-speed rail as a concept is an incredibly important step in the fight against climate change and in the reduction of carbon emissions. China's success in large part has to do with their vision and political will, which California citizens do not overwhelmingly have, at least not in this direction. For a large-scale public transportation system like this to be effective, you need to have the majority of people on board. With astronomically rising gas prices and fluctuations in climate from global warming becoming ever more clear, now may be the best chance at convincing individuals that they would primarily benefit from the high-speed rail development. The project has a marketing problem, a lack of vision, and a lack of accessibility to the public. When people hear about the California Bullet Train project, they see it as this logistical mess and a pipe dream, especially when the state's current public transit lines are already known for being incredibly underfunded, lacking sufficient maintenance, and overall just being pretty run down. So people's expectations are fairly low. On top of that, many people are completely unaware of the successful developments abroad. The California High-Speed Rail Authority really needs to reconsider their marketing to genuinely see success in their future. On top of this, high-speed rail is only effective if people actually choose it as an alternative. The fact of the matter is we've had quite a strong individualist, automobile-focused culture, and to get people to start taking the train more seriously would take a complete shift in our transportation culture for both the state and the country. But it's been done before, and look at the dominance of the railroad and how we shifted to automobiles. All it takes is a little effort. So this comes back to how you market the idea and project a vision for the future, which China successfully did, keeping in mind that California has much more democratic control than China in this instance. If the bullet train isn't marketed the right way, then even when it gets built, not enough Californians will use it as an alternative for it to justify the costs or successfully reduce the carbon emissions by getting cars off the road. There are much larger cultural issues at hand that also need to be accounted for in projects like this one. While cost may be a logistical barrier, political will seems to be the main boundary for this development. One can hope for a green future ahead of us, but unless we have a shared vision for the future, we won't get much done. But one can hope.